Selamun Aleyküm ve Rahmetullah ve Berekatuhu. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil Alemin ve salatu ve selamu ala Resulina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmain. Subhaneke la ilme lana illa ma'allamtana inneke entel alimul hakim. So today I'm going to be talking about the spiritual and the physical aspects of fasting. Hopefully in the first session we'll cover the spiritual side, and in the second we'll have a break, and then we'll talk about the physical part of Ramadan and fasting. Now, usually scholars, when they classify or describe the pillars of Islam, the practices of Islam, they say that the pillars are practiced with the body or the wealth. So the shahada, the 5 daily prayers and fasting is done with the body. The zakat is done with the wealth because you pay money. Hajj is done with the body and the wealth. So there's a nice way to remember the general classification of the pillars of Islam. Now, fasting is obviously a little bit more in depth. I don't think we can just categorize it in that simple way. So what I'm going to do is that describe to you in this first the spiritual aspects, the 30 days of Ramadan and how that helps us change 10 days at a time. How we're supposed to transform ourselves starting the first day. And we assume obviously most of us don't fast outside of Ramadan, or even if we do it sporadically. I mean, if you're fasting Mondays and Thursdays, great. So you'd be used to it. But nevertheless, fasting a whole month changes a lot of things within you, both spiritually, mentally, and physically as well. So I'm going to describe what those changes are, and hopefully that will give you a really good picture of what Ramadan is all about, what fasting is all about, and how you can expect to transform yourself across the whole month. Not look at Ramadan just 1 day of fasting, 2 days of fasting, but a whole 29 to 30 days of fasting, inshallah. Now, fasting has become a very popular exercise in the world, like intermittent fasting. You open up YouTube channel, just type in intermittent fasting, all sorts of videos come up. The great health benefits, the anti-aging benefits of fasting is there. Even our own Chris Hemsworth, there was a National Geographic series called Limitless, and in this one, Chris Hemsworth tried different ways of preventing aging or slowing down aging with Peter Attia. Peter Attia is one of the influencers on YouTube on aging and exercise. And in one episode, Chris Hemsworth did a four-day water fasting, so water only, so no eating at all. And at the end of the 4 days, Chris Hemsworth, he said, "I'm losing my mind," and he said it was the hardest thing he has ever done. So there's something really heroic about fasting, like depriving yourself eating and drinking for an extended time, even though you can eat and drink, is a great form of human activity, what we humans can do. Also, fasting is something that emulates angels, where, a person is, angels, as you know, don't eat and drink, right? They don't have any sexual relations. So by stopping eating and drinking and, marital relations, you're emulating angels. So we're becoming angelic, or bringing out the angelic side or the spiritual side more foreground, rather than this flesh and blood that we have on us. The obviously physical aspect of fasting is really important, which I will touch in the second half. And basically, I'm going to try to explain to you how you can not gain weight in Ramadan. Because some people complain of gaining weight. I'm going to explain to you why people gain weight in Ramadan and how you can actually do the opposite. Because the fasting is supposed to be, healthy as well in terms of physical aspects. So we don't want to be unhealthy after Ramadan, inshallah. So I said that we can group the act of fasting as a worship, across the 3 10-day periods in the whole, whole month of fasting. In the first 10 days corresponds with what we call, I'll give you firstly very briefly, teaching us taqwa in the first 10 days. In the second 10 days, we learn what I call intentional gratitude. So we normally focus on taqwa aspect of fasting, but the gratitude aspect is also in the Quran in relation to fasting. And the last 10 days, it's a deeper experience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and charity towards others. So basically in the first 10 days, we're learning taqwa, what is really taqwa is truly, and you're exercising that, practicing that. And that enables you to move on to experience true form of intentional gratitude. So once you got taqwa and gratitude, then this opens up your heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a heart that's open to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up to other people as well, which is what Ramadan is about. It's a month of mercy. It's a month of mercy where Allah reflects His mercy on us, and our mercy is supposed to reflect on other fellow human beings, inshallah, those who are suffering. So let me explain to you how these all fit together, inshallah. Now, there's a famous verse in the Quran which kind of prescribes fasting. Chapter 2, verse 183. It says, fasting has been prescribed to you as it was prescribed to nations before you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It finishes with that expression, which kind of, sometimes people translate that as so that you learn taqwa, or so that you learn God consciousness or righteousness. But the real word is taqwa. Now taqwa is one of the key teachings of Quran, key spiritual teachings. It's a very important concept. It's repeated in many places in the Quran. Now, the Arabic word taqwa comes from the word waqa, and basically it means to protect, shield, and safeguard. So to protect, shield, or safeguard. So it refers to the competence of self-control. Like if a person has taqwa is not just a state, it's a competence. When you learn it, because the Quran says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, right? So that you may learn taqwa. Not as a concept, not just as an idea and a concept, but we actually, through practicing it, it becomes a competence in our character and in our practice of everyday life and religion as well. So basically that as a competence, and also to be in a state of self-guarding. So you're in a state of self-guarding, and we practice that over time, then becomes a competence of self-control. So this is how we can define taqwa as intended by the Quran. So generally, when we do something in Islam, we are generally doing something, like there's an act involved. Like you're praying, you go prostration and so on. You make dua, you speak, but in fast, in Hajj, you travel and all of that, the circumambulation of Kaaba. But in fasting is the only act of worship where you don't do anything. right? So fasting is about not doing things. Well, you're not eating, right? You're not drinking, and also so basically that's it. That's what fasting is about. So abstaining from things, because when we abstain from things, it then puts us. You're safeguarding yourself, and we're learning self-control. Now there is a famous experiment. This is repeated a lot, made famous by Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence. I highly recommend you to read that book, like Emotional Intelligence. Very good, important concept to learn, to learn empathy and related concepts. Now, in that book, he talks about an experiment, a research where they take these 4-year-old kids, and they ask them. They say to them, "Look, I've got here some chocolate on the table, but I'm just going to leave the room for 10 minutes. If you don't eat what's on here, I'm going to give you double that." So they leave the room and watch these kids. Some of them eat it straight away, and some of them wait. But the experiment doesn't finish there. They actually watch these kids for the next 15 years. And they discovered that those kids who could wait, basically they're delaying their impulse, right? The kids who could wait, they were more successful at school, in their friendships, in their family, and in life in general, than the kids who couldn't wait. So that means that abstaining from something or controlling yourself, even though there's an impulse within that says do something, eat that, is directly correlated to success in life. And this one goes again to religion, because if a person can control themselves, if you're tempted to sin, you're not going to sin, will you? Or you can control yourself better than someone who can't. None of us are perfect, but someone who's got self-control will also have discipline. And so someone who has discipline then will be successful in other avenues of life. So basically, this is the greatest aspect of fasting, or one of the greatest spiritual practice of fasting, that we learn to abstain from things. And when we do this in Ramadan, in the first 10 days, it comes as a shock to our system. Because although you may have self-control, you may have discipline, but not in the way that fasting gives you. Like when you fast for 10 days in a row. Now, along with that, you're really sharpening your ability to control yourself, basically. The other thing that happens in the first 10 days of fasting is your body goes through a detox. And I'm going to explain to you more of this in the second part of this class tonight, where I'm going to go in detail what happens to your physical body when you're fasting. And also when you open your fast, by the way. That's the biggest part, or some of the biggest issues that happens in Ramadan in a negative sense. So imagine a situation. You started your Ramadan, so you're learning this self-control. All of a sudden you're challenged. You want to do things that you were used to everyday life, eating, drinking, and other things, but you're not doing that. So you're sharpening that saw. And at the same time, our body is going through detox, cleansing itself. Your mind becomes sharper because you're staying more hungry. When we're hungry, our body releases growth hormone and other hormones that really open your mind, make you more alert to the world around you, makes you more focused, and repair the body. So basically you're physically prepared and you're mentally prepared for the next phase to come. So you have learned taqwa. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So that's the first benefit of or spiritual aspect of fasting. For those of you who came later, I've split Ramadan into 3 phases. In the first phase, we learn taqwa. In the second phase, what do we learn? Intentional gratitude. Intentional gratitude, I emphasize that part. And the third part is that we enter into a deeper relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we open our heart to the people around us in a different way. So that's number 1. So we've covered so far how Ramadan teaches us taqwa. All right, the second, now that our mind is clear, it's sharp, we've got sharper inner feelings in the spirit, and our body is now ready for the second phase, the intentional gratitude. Now, the verse that made fasting compulsory is verse 183 on chapter 2. So there's another verse, 185. It's pretty long, but it finishes with another expression, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, so that you may learn shukr. Shukr is another very important spiritual concept in the Quran. You know, sometimes we talk about spirituality in very advanced language. You know, we think that only saints, Imam Ghazalis of the world can be spiritual, that's deep. When you read these spiritual concepts of books, it just goes over your head. These are for the elite, you know, they are developed later on. But the Quran, and they're in the Quran as well, but they're for the elite. For the majority, 95% of the Muslims out there, Quran addresses us in far more broadly, and because most of us will be ordinary Muslim. But even an ordinary Muslim is a spiritual athlete. You're fasting 30 days in a month, praying 5 times a day, you know. You're an athlete, spiritually. So basically, you know, the Quran has these concepts that it repeats it many times, such as we talked about taqwa, ikhlas is another one, like sincerity, and shukr is another one, gratitude. Now, very interesting, and this part of fasting is not talked about usually. Everybody repeats the verse 183. But we forget about لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ part of verse 185. Now, I want to, last year I was thinking at the beginning of the year, I want to make this year, or I thought about, you know, okay, what do I know about Islam? And what am I practicing? What part am I practicing? You know how at the end you do this New Year's resolutions, or you should be reflecting on, you know, our lives. And I thought, okay, I'm practicing all the rituals, but when it comes to the spiritual aspects, I have a lot of knowledge, alhamdulillah, but when it comes to the spiritual aspects, I don't think I have mastered them. I'm talking about mastering them. Not everyday thing, like for example, gratitude, right? We should be in a state of thankfulness, and we just say thank you to everyone. Okay, thank you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, for giving me all these wonderful blessings. Once, twice in our lifetime? Come on, you know? So that's not mastering. So in a mastering sense, I thought I really need to deeply understand what shukr is and also practice it. And then really feel it. It becomes part of my inner world and experience of everyday life and religion. So I said, I can only do this, I can only master something if I do it every day. You know, if you're going to, for example, do weight training, you probably do weight training, right? How many days a week do you train?
Quite often, yeah.
5, 6 times? 4, 5?
5, 4, 5.
Yeah, so see, 4, 5, almost every day. So for you to master something, you have to repeat it. And it has to be repeated every week, every day if possible. Obviously, you don't train every day because you have to recuperate, but you can be grateful every day. There's no tiredness of being in a state of gratefulness. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this every day, and the way I will do it is I will find 3 things that I will be grateful about every day. Some of them could be same thing. If I find something unique, fantastic on that day. If I don't, I'll just repeat the same things that I'm having. Having wonderful food, for example, or someone smiling at you, being able to pay a bill, or being physically going through a hard workout or something in the gym. That being grateful that you're able to do this workout. Now I know, or just being healthy. Like I know, for example, somebody acquaintance in our cycling club, he's 48 years old, he just had a stroke in Singapore. And his family is grateful that he's able to move a finger. I mean, the guy is reduced to being able to move a finger. I mean, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him full health and recovery, inshallah. But I'm actually thinking about that. I'm older than him. I'm so thankful that I'm not in that situation. Like when you really think about this and feel gratitude, and gratitude is a feeling, by the way. It's a state and a feeling. And when you feel that, it's amazing. It feels amazing. Like it just fills you with positive energy. Some serotonin in your brain or some endorphins are released, which makes you happy. And so I worked on it, and I think I have mastered it, alhamdulillah. And I'm trying to keep that practice going. This year it's sabr. You know how Muslims are supposed to be in either of 2 states, either being thankful, gratitude, or in patience, sabr. So this year I'm mastering sabr. And it's amazing as well, by the way. Maybe I'll do a talk one day on that, shukr and sabr, how they work together. It's really amazing because the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, the situation of a believer is amazing. They are either in a state of thankfulness or a state of patience. They're thankful of good things, they're patient for bad things. Just like our bodies are also in 2 states all the time in terms of hormones, sympathetic, parasympathetic. I'll explain to you what they are, very important for fasting after the break. So it's extraordinary, these things. So gratitude or shukr, I'm using the Arabic words because we need to learn these important Quranic concepts in the Arabic original because they carry a whole tradition and literature with it. But I like the word thanking. You can say thanking, thankfulness, but I like the word gratitude. It's far warmer, and it translates better into what Quran intends with it. How does fasting teaches us gratitude? Remember that لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, right? The key emphasis here that you have to learn how to be grateful. So now, true thanksgiving, we could define it as appreciating or knowing that all sustenance and blessings that we have, all the good things, comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 1. Number 2, we're feeling the need for them. And number 3, acknowledging and appreciating their value. I'll repeat. Feeling the need for sustenance, 2, appreciating their value, 3, that they come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately. So these 3 conditions to really appreciate gratitude. Fasting is the only thing that teaches us all 3 at the same time. Because when we fast, One, when you're really hungry, you really appreciate the value of piece of bread. You know, that you may take it for granted. We may throw out, you know. Like we don't really feel what it means to be deprived of something. Like when I was a kid, I was taught, if you see a piece of bread on the ground, pick it up, kiss it, and put it away somewhere so that people don't walk all over it. And this obviously comes from the culture, and because people in the past, they knew what it meant to be in drought, hunger, the value of a piece of bread. But when I came to Australia, I was shocked how kids were throwing sandwiches into the playground, and I was picking up everything off the ground, you know. I gave up after a while, but I never throw away a piece of food personally. I gave up picking up things, you know. So really, so when we can only feel a cup of glass of water when you're really thirsty, and fasting gives you that. So that's number one. Number two, we need to appreciate that we need these things. Without them, we cannot survive, and that's also in a state of hunger and thirst. We really appreciate that. And also, thirdly, you are you're fasting because Allah asked you to do. Allah commanded you to do, nothing else. I can't force you to fast. I can't make you fast. Most people probably won't fast. I'm not sure how many people are doing intermittent fasting, but probably not too many as well. But 80% of Muslims fast in Ramadan because it is God's commandment. So basically, the fact that you are stopping eating and drinking because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you to do, you're acknowledging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're acknowledging that all that food and drink comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why fasting is a great act of worship. It's an act of worship that teaches us how to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala firstly, but with that we can enter into this state of gratefulness so that you can be grateful to others also at the same time. So basically that's the second 10 days, the middle 10 days of Ramadan. So once you've cleansed yourself, you learn taqwa, and now you're learning, you should be focusing on gratitude. Like in the initial 10 days of Ramadan, don't focus too much on the gratitude side. Focus on controlling yourself, because if you're a coffee drinker, you're gonna have headaches. So you're going to have problems, you're gonna have to deal with that. Like your mind's not gonna be on gratitude. Your mind's going to be on balancing your body, getting used to not eating and drinking. So that's the self-control part. But after 10 days, you'll be, all right, I got the hang of this, you know. So now you can explore the gratitude part. So I suggest in the middle 10 days of Ramadan, every day, think of 3 things that you are grateful about. You can be grateful about, and then think about those things, and then relate. I can guarantee you, the moment you think consciously, intentionally, that I'm so grateful for this, and you say, I'm so grateful for this, immediately your mind goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you realize, okay, the source of all of this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you remember Allah, and your heart gushes with spiritual energy. It's amazing. So that takes us to the third day of the last 10 days of Ramadan. And this is where yearning for a deeper experience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and willingness to engage with the world around us and with the suffering of people. Like for this reason, the Prophet ﷺ did itikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan. Itikaf means retreating away from people, focusing on your worship and Allah, relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because now you're ready. You learned taqwa, you learned gratitude, now your heart is open to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you can engage with a deep relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why, in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that, it's a hadith al-Qudsi, he said that Allah said, every good deed that sons of Adam do is for them. But fasting is for me, I will give them their reward. Interesting, isn't it? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is singling out fasting from every other act of worship. Because it's special for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm going to explain to you why it's special for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the actual acts of worship are acts of worship because it's an active remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's dhikr, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, why is remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or an act of worship important? Because it's the only way we bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence to our lives. Or we realize, we bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to our consciousness, basically. Because Allah is not visible in this world, in this universe. Without us bringing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to our consciousness, almost Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absent from our lives. You know what I mean? Like Allah exists, but it's like the sun, the way the sun exists in the sky. You don't think about on a daily basis, the sun is there watching me, do you? I'm not suggesting sun is conscious, but I'll just imagine for a moment. But every day, every moment, sun is stroking you with its light, heat, provide you, heat and all these benefits. The photosynthesis all happens because of the sun and so on. That's why people worship the sun in the past. They thought it was God. I'm not suggesting that, but my point is that but when you say, the sun is there, it's giving me these benefits, then you remember the closeness of the sun to you already. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever present, He exists. But our consciousness is absent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we do dhikr, or when we do an act of worship, we are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why acts of worship are important. You know how we say humans are created to worship Allah, and then people say, well, why does Allah need that? Well, Allah doesn't need it, but acts of worship is the only thing that brings Allah's presence into this universe, into our consciousness. And with that, we establish a relationship, deep relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a verse in the Quran that says, like, فَاذْكُرُونِ أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Like, dhikr is linked to shukr, interestingly, right? Like it says, remember me, I will remember you, be grateful, don't deny me. And dhikr, we can say Allah, la ilaha illallah, basically remember Allah, it's great. You are acknowledging the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we do that. But with shukr, with gratitude, we are not only acknowledging the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we are also acknowledging Allah's attributes. He's the provider. He's the one who creates. All of those attributes come with when you contemplate Allah in a state of shukr, gratefulness. Now, imagine that. Now, I said all of that. These kind of feelings and thoughts are magnified when? The moments or minutes before we break the fast. The moments we break the fast, what happens? Everyone's taking up the chair on the table. We're waiting, all the food is on the table. and we're waiting for that signal to come. You can break your fast. And the act of waiting is actually an act of devotion. So all those thoughts like gratitude, our need, the value of the food, all of those come to you just before you break your fast. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, make dua in that moment. Allah will not reject it. And the reason for that is, just imagine for a moment that the earth rotates around the sun. So the moment of sunset is continuously repeated across the globe for a day. So somewhere in the world, someone is opening up their fast. And these thoughts and emotions, gratitude are coming. The act of worship is focusing. There's a line that crosses. So more than 1 billion Muslims in the world are doing this. And not only for a day, but this continues along for that entire month. Almost so there's a continuous act of worship that's happening in Ramadan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the perspective of the Creator, this is what Allah sees. You just see your moment, your day, you start, you finish at this time. But what Allah sees, He looks at the entire planet, entire earth, and all He sees is millions of people breaking their fast, pray, like making dua, worshipping, feeling grateful. All of that is repeated every moment for the entire month of Ramadan. This is why fasting is special to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why He say, everything else is for people, but I will reward people, surprise them in afterlife, inshallah. So, if I just sum up, we can approach Ramadan spiritually in 3 ways. So what was the first one? First 10 days of Ramadan? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. We learn taqwa, so we practice self-control. We realign our body, our spirit, our mind, so everything is realigned. We learn that takes about 10 days. In the middle 10 days, what do we do? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. We learn to practice intentional gratitude. And to do that, I gave you a simple formula. Think of 3 things that you can be grateful about, inshallah, every day. And then do that for 10 days and it will become a habit, inshallah. You will do that for the rest of the year. And the last 10 days, we focus on our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That remembrance of Allah should increase, our worship should be deeper, and more gratefulness and more as a veneration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as our Creator. Because now your nafs is being tamed. Because like people cannot prostrate if they are arrogant. If people are arrogant, you can't prostrate properly. People hate it because you're hitting your head into the ground. And but before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can do that. So this is the spiritual aspects of fasting and spiritual benefits of fasting. Inshallah, if we can think of this, reflect these in this month of Ramadan, it will be far more beneficial for all of us, inshallah.